Fleet Commander Zethkar stood in the center of the war room aboard the mighty battleship Times Eternal Honor ***. The blue glow from the holographic displays cast shadows across his scarred face. Around the circular table, his senior officers waited in silence. Today they would discuss the newest species to join the galaxy's community of star-traveling races. "Bring up the human files," Zethkar commanded. The central display flickered to life. Images of Earth appeared, showing a blue world covered in water and clouds. Then came pictures of humans themselves, small, soft creatures with no natural weapons or armor. They looked weak compared to the powerful Kethmori warriors. "These are the humans," said Intelligence Officer Korthon, his voice filled with disgust. "They achieved faster than light travel only 50 years ago. They are still children compared to our Empire's 10,000 years of spaceflight." Zethkar studied the data carefully. The Kethmori were a proud warrior race. Their bodies were tall and strong, covered in natural armor plates. Their culture valued honor above all else. For thousands of years, they had followed the sacred code, a set of laws that governed every aspect of their lives. "What do we know about their wars?" Zethkar asked. Korthon's expression grew darker. "This is where they become truly disturbing, Commander. Most species fight for logical reasons. Territory, resources, survival. The humans fight for ideas." The display changed to show human conflicts throughout history. Wars over religion, politics, and social systems. Battles fought not for land or wealth, but for beliefs that could not be touched or measured. "Look at this madness," said Captain Mordoon, pointing at the images. "They killed millions of their own kind over which version of their gods they believed in. They destroyed entire cities over economic theories. They are chaos given form." Zethkar nodded slowly. "The Kethmori fought when necessary, but always for clear purposes. Territory to expand their empire, resources to feed their people, honor to maintain their standing. These humans seem to fight over nothing but thoughts and dreams." "What of their military capabilities?" he asked. "Primitive but numerous," Korthon replied. "They build crude ships and weapons, but they have many of them. Their technology is centuries behind ours. A single Kethmori warship could destroy 10 of their vessels without effort." The room fell silent as Zethkar considered the information. The Kethmori Empire had strict policies about dealing with younger races. They offered friendship to those who showed wisdom and honor. They conquered those who threatened galactic peace. They ignored those who seemed beneath their notice. "Recommendation?" Zethkar asked his officers. "Minimal contact," said Mordoon immediately. "They are too chaotic to be allies, too weak to be threats. Let them play their foolish games in their small corner of space." "Agreed," added Korthon. "The Empire has more important matters to attend to. These humans will likely destroy themselves within a few centuries anyway." Zethkar walked to the great window that looked out into space. Stars dotted the darkness like distant diamonds. Each one might hold worlds, civilizations, and stories. The Kethmori had explored this galaxy for millennia, always seeking worthy allies and honorable enemies. "Very well," he said finally. "Classify humanity as a developing nuisance. All ships will avoid their space unless absolutely necessary. We have no interest in their chaos." The officers began to file out of the room, satisfied with the decision. But Zethkar remained by the window, something bothering him about the whole situation. He could not put his finger on what it was. "Commander," said Communications Officer Veltara as she prepared to leave. "There is one more thing about the humans you should know." "What is it?" "They use the Galactic Distress Signal System. 3 months ago, they registered their emergency frequencies with the Galactic Council. They follow the same beacon protocols as the rest of us." Zethkar felt a chill run through him. The sacred code was very clear about distress signals. Any beacon, from any species, had to be answered. It was the most ancient and holy law of their people. Even enemies deserved rescue if they called for help. "Are you saying we might have to rescue humans someday?" asked Captain Mordoon, who had overheard. "The code is absolute," Zethkar replied grimly. If they send a distress signal, we must answer. No matter what we think of them. Morduan shook his head. Let us hope that day never comes. I cannot imagine risking Kethmori lives for such creatures. After the officers left, Zethkar remained alone in the war room. He stared at the human data files, trying to understand what made them so different from other species. Most young races were eager to please the older, more powerful civilizations. They sought knowledge, protection, or trade agreements. But the humans seemed content to ignore the rest of the galaxy. Their few diplomatic contacts had been polite but brief. They asked for nothing except to be left alone to manage their own affairs. In a way, Zethkar found this almost admirable, even if their methods were chaotic. He closed the files and walked to his private quarters. The ship hummed around him as they traveled through space toward their next patrol sector. The Kethmori fleet was always moving, always watching for threats to the Empire and its allies. As he prepared for sleep, Zethkar offered a prayer to the ancient spirits of his people. He asked for wisdom in command, courage in battle, and strength to uphold the sacred code, the same prayer his ancestors had spoken for countless generations. He did not pray to encounter the humans again. Some part of him hoped they would remain in their distant corner of space, fighting their strange wars over their impossible ideas. The galaxy was vast enough for all species to find their own path. But deep in his heart, Zethkar knew that the galaxy had a way of bringing together the most unlikely companions, and the sacred code would not be denied, no matter how much he might wish to avoid these chaotic, unpredictable humans. The stars continued their ancient dance outside his window, as the Time's eternal honor times sailed on through the night. 3 months had passed since the meeting about humans. Fleet Commander Zethkar sat in deep meditation within his private chambers. The ancient practice helped him find peace between the endless duties of command. Around him, candles flickered in the darkness, their light dancing across the sacred symbols carved into the walls. A sharp alarm shattered the silence. The emergency tone meant only one thing: a priority message that could not wait. Zethkar opened his eyes and activated his communication device. "Commander," came the urgent voice of Communications Officer Veltara. "You need to come to the bridge immediately. We have received a code red distress beacon." Zethkar felt his blood freeze. Code red was not used lightly. It meant that thousands of lives faced immediate danger of extinction. He rose quickly and made his way through the corridors of the Time's eternal honor asterisk. Crew members stepped aside respectfully as their commander passed. The bridge buzzed with activity when he arrived. Officers hunched over their stations, checking and rechecking the signal data. The main display showed a star map with a pulsing red dot marking the source of the distress call. "Report," Zethkar commanded as he took his position in the command chair. Veltara approached with a data tablet in her hands. Her expression was troubled. "The signal came through 20 minutes ago on all emergency frequencies. It originates from the human colony world designated Haven's Rest." The words hit Zethkar like a physical blow. Of all the species in the galaxy, it had to be humans. He studied the information on the display, hoping for some mistake or misunderstanding. "Are you certain it is authentic?" he asked. "Yes, Commander. The signal uses proper galactic distress protocols. It indicates that 50,000 civilian lives are in immediate danger from an unknown catastrophe. The automated beacon is transmitting the exact coordinates and requesting immediate assistance." Captain Morduan stepped forward, his face grim. "Commander, I recommend we ignore this transmission. Our standing orders are to avoid human space. This could be some kind of trick or trap." "The signal appears genuine," said Intelligence Officer Korthan. "But I agree with Captain Morduan. We should not risk our ships and crew for humans. Let them solve their own problems." Zethkar stood silently, feeling the weight of command pressing down on him like a mountain. Every instinct told him to agree with his officers. The humans were not allies. They had shown no interest in building relationships with the Kethmori Empire. Why should he risk valuable warriors for a species that meant nothing to them? But the sacred code was not about personal feelings or political alliances. It was about duty and honor that transcended such concerns. "What is our current position?" he asked. "We are 2 days' travel from the human colony at maximum speed," replied Navigation Officer Tethmar. "We would have to abandon our current patrol route and take 3 warships deep into human territory." "The risk is considerable," added Mordoun. "If this is indeed a real emergency, we might face whatever force is threatening the humans. We could lose ships and warriors for people who care nothing about us." "Well?" Zethkar walked to the main display and stared at the pulsing red dot. Somewhere in that distant star system, 50,000 lives hung in the balance. Men, women, children. Regardless of species, they were living beings who faced death. "Sir," said Veltara softly, "the sacred code is clear about distress signals." "I know the code," Zethkar replied sharply. Then he softened his tone. "Forgive me. You are right to remind me of our duty." He turned to face his senior staff. These were warriors who had fought beside him for years. They trusted his judgment and would follow his orders without question. But he could see the doubt in their eyes. "The sacred code has guided our people for 10,000 years, he began. "It was written by our ancestors who understood that honor means doing what is right, even when it is difficult. Especially when it is difficult." "But, Commander," protested Korthon, "these are humans. They fight meaningless wars and live in chaos. They do not deserve our sacrifice." "Reasers, the code does not ask us to judge who deserves rescue," Zethkar replied firmly. "It requires us to answer every distress call, regardless of the source. This law exists because once we start deciding who is worthy of help, we begin to lose what makes us Keth Mori." The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Zethkar could feel his officers struggling with the decision. He understood their reluctance. Part of him shared it. "Consider this," he continued. "What would other species think if they learned the mighty Keth Mori ignored a code-red distress signal? Would the Altari still trust our protection treaties? Would the Zenith Consortium still honor our trade agreements? Our reputation for reliability is worth more than any single colony." Captain Mordoun nodded slowly. "You speak wisdom, Commander, but I still believe this is a mistake." "Your objection is noted and understood," Zethkar replied, "but my decision is made." He turned to the navigation station. "Tethmar, plot a course for Haven's Rest. Maximum speed." "Yes, Commander." "Veltara, send word to the battleships, times Iron Resolve times and times Stormbearer *. They will accompany us." "At once, sir." As the orders were carried out, Zethkar felt a heavy weight settle in his stomach. He was committing 1,500 Keth Mori warriors to rescue humans, the same species his empire had classified as beneath their notice. If the mission failed, if lives were lost, the responsibility would be his alone. The ship's engines increased their power as the Time's Eternal Honor Times changed course toward human space. Within minutes, the other 2 warships had acknowledged their orders and were adjusting their routes to join the rescue fleet. "Time to arrival?" Zethkar asked. 47 hours at current speed," replied Tethmar. 47 hours to reach whatever crisis awaited them. Zethkar privately hoped they would arrive to find the emergency over and the humans already safe. Perhaps their own ships had resolved the situation, making the Keth Mori intervention unnecessary. But the cynical part of his mind whispered a darker thought. Maybe they would arrive to find the colony already destroyed, the 50,000 civilians dead. In that case, they could honor the sacred code by attempting rescue while avoiding any real risk or sacrifice. He pushed such thoughts away. A true warrior did not hope for the easy path. Whatever awaited them at Haven's Rest, the Keth Mori fleet would face it with honor. As the stars shifted around them and the ship entered the long journey toward human space, Zethkar wondered if this decision would be remembered as wisdom or folly. Only time would tell. The Keth Mori fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Haven's Rest system. What they found made even the veteran warriors pause in shock. The planet below was dying. Massive explosions covered the surface like a spreading disease. Entire continents glowed with the orange light of destruction. From orbit, they could see enormous machines moving across the landscape, tearing up everything in their path. "What in the name of the ancestors is that?" breathed Captain Mordoon as he stared at the main display. Intelligence Officer Korthon worked frantically at his station. "Commander, I am detecting Vraktar energy signatures. Multiple harvester ships and ground units." Fleet Commander Zethkar felt ice form in his veins. The Vraktar were one of the galaxy's worst nightmares. A machine intelligence that consumed entire worlds to fuel their endless expansion. They stripped planets bare of all useful materials, leaving nothing but dead rocks behind. "How many of them?" he demanded. 40 Vraktar vessels in the system," reported Korthon, "including 3 harvester ships and multiple destroyer units. They have been here for at least 6 hours based on the damage patterns." The tactical display lit up with enemy contacts. Red dots swarmed around the planet like angry insects. But there were other contacts too. Small blue markers that indicated active fighting. "Sir," called out sensor operator Jeth Cole, "I am reading human ships. 12 vessels, all showing battle damage. They are still fighting." Zethkar stared at the display in disbelief. 12 human ships against 40 Vraktar vessels? It should have been over in minutes. The humans should all be dead or running for their lives, yet somehow, impossibly, they continued to resist. "Show me the battle," he ordered. The main screen switched to a visual feed from their long-range sensors. What they saw defied all military logic. The human ships were indeed heavily damaged. Several trailed atmosphere and debris. Their weapons were clearly inferior to Vraktar technology, but they fought on with desperate courage. A human destroyer, its hull cracked and venting plasma, threw itself between a Vraktar cruiser and a transport ship full of civilians. The destroyer's shields failed under the enemy barrage, but it bought precious seconds for the transport to escape to safety. "Madness," whispered Mordoon. "Pure madness. They should retreat." Communications. Officer Veltara looked up from her station with surprise on her face. "Commander, I am intercepting human military communications. They are not giving retreat orders." "What are they saying?" "They are coordinating evacuation efforts. The military ships are buying time for civilian transports to escape the planet. They know they cannot win, but they refuse to abandon their people." Zethkar watched a human cruiser position itself directly in the path of 3 Vraktar destroyers. The human ship was outgunned and outnumbered, but its captain held position until a convoy of refugee ships cleared the danger zone. "Open a channel to the human fleet commander," Zethkar ordered. The main display flickered and showed the bridge of a human warship. Smoke filled the air, and sparks flew from damaged systems. At the center sat a woman in a military uniform, her face streaked with blood but her eyes still fierce and determined. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force," she said in accented but clear Galactic Standard language. "Are you the Kethmori vessels that responded to our distress call?" "I am Fleet Commander Zethkar of the Kethmori Empire," he replied formally. "We received your code red beacon and have come to render assistance." Admiral Chen's expression showed surprise and gratitude, but no pleading desperation. "Commander Zethkar, I thank you for honoring the distress protocols. We are facing Vraktar harvester forces that began their attack 6 hours ago. Current estimate is 50,000 civilians still on the surface in hardened shelters. What is your tactical situation?" Zethkar asked, though he could see for himself how desperate things were. "We have 12 ships operational, down from 24 that we started with. Our weapons are having minimal effect on their armor, but we are holding the orbital space long enough for evacuation transports to reach the surface. We estimate another 4 hours needed to extract all civilians." "Admiral," said Zethkar carefully, "your position is hopeless. The logical action would be to retreat and preserve your remaining forces." For a moment, Admiral Chen looked puzzled, as if she could not understand the suggestion. "Commander, there are 50,000 people down there, men, women, children who are counting on us to get them out. We do not abandon our people." The transmission ended as her ship took another hit from Vraktar weapons. Zethkar watched her crew work to keep their failing systems online. Not one of them showed any sign of panic or desire to flee. "They are going to die," said Morduan quietly. "All of them. Those 12 ships cannot hold against 40 Vraktar vessels for 4 more hours." "No," agreed Zethkar. "They cannot." He paused, studying the tactical display. "But 15 Kethmori ships can." His officers stared at him in shock. Captain Morduan stepped forward. "Commander, are you suggesting we fight alongside the humans? The sacred code requires us to render assistance to those in distress. These humans are clearly in distress. The logical course of action is to help them complete their evacuation." "But sir," protested Korthon, "this means engaging the Vraktar directly. We could lose ships and warriors for people we barely know." Zethkar turned to look at the image of the dying planet below. Somewhere on that world, 50,000 people huddled in shelters, waiting for rescue that might never come. Above them, 12 human ships fought against impossible odds, buying time with their blood and courage. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "All ships to battle stations. We engage the Vraktar forces immediately. Priority is protecting the evacuation transports and keeping orbital space clear for rescue operations." "And the humans, sir?" asked Veltara. Zethkar watched Admiral Chen's damaged ship take up position beside a crippled transport, using its own hull as a shield. The gesture was tactically insignificant but spoke to something deeper than military doctrine. "Send a message to Admiral Chen," he said. "Tell her the Kethmori fleet stands ready to assist. Ask for her tactical data on Vraktar capabilities, and request coordination for joint operations." As his officers rushed to carry out the orders, Zethkar remained focused on the battle display. For the first time in months, he found himself curious about these strange humans who fought impossible battles for principles rather than survival. In a few minutes, he would learn firsthand what kind of allies they might make. The thought both worried and intrigued him in equal measure. The combined fleet struck the Vraktar forces like a hammer blow. 15 Kethmori warships, their armor gleaming and weapons charged, tore into the enemy formation with practiced precision. Fleet Commander Zethkar watched from the bridge of the Time's eternal honor times as his warriors showed why the Empire had ruled space for millennia. But it was not the Kethmori that captured his attention. It was the humans. Admiral Chen's battered fleet moved with desperate purpose. Their ships were smaller, weaker, and badly damaged. By every military standard, they should have pulled back to support roles and let the superior Kethmori forces handle the fighting. Instead, they threw themselves into the most dangerous positions without hesitation. "Human destroyer times Defiant times moving to engage 3 Vraktar cruisers," reported Tactical Officer Deathmore. "That ship has lost shields and half its weapons. This is suicide." Zethkar studied the tactical display as the human ship accelerated toward the enemy formation. "What is their target?" 22R. "Unknown, sir. There are no strategic objectives in that sector except..." Deathmore paused, checking his readings. "Sir, there is a civilian transport trapped behind those cruisers. The transport's engines are damaged and cannot escape." They watched as the Defiant times engaged all 3 enemy ships simultaneously. Vraktar energy beams tore through its armor, but the human ship pressed forward. Its captain was buying time with his crew's lives, trading one ship for the chance to save a transport full of refugees. The destroyer's sacrifice worked. While the Vraktar focused their fire on the attacking warship, a Kethmori battlecruiser flanked the enemy formation and destroyed 2 of the 3 cruisers. The transport escaped to safety just as the Defiant times exploded in brilliant fire. "Madness," muttered Captain Morduan. "One ship for one transport. The mathematics make no sense." But Zethkar found himself thinking about those mathematics differently. How many civilians had been aboard that transport? Hundreds? 1,000? If each life had value, then perhaps the trade was not as senseless as it appeared. "Admiral Chen is requesting permission to lead the next evacuation run to the surface," reported Communications Officer Veltara. "The surface?" Zethkar looked at the planet below, where Vraktar ground forces continued their systematic destruction. That is a death trap. Any ship that enters the atmosphere will face concentrated fire from harvester machines. The Admiral states that the remaining shelter complexes are taking heavy damage. They estimate 6,000 civilians will not survive another hour without immediate extraction. On the tactical display, Zethkar could see the human Admiral's ship, the cruiser Times Resolution, *, moving toward the planet despite having lost most of its defensive systems. Behind it followed 3 more human ships, all volunteers for what amounted to a suicide mission. "Sir," said Intelligence Officer Korthon, "I recommend we deny this request. We cannot protect ships operating that deep in the gravity well while under fire from surface weapons." Zethkar studied the display for a long moment. The logical decision was clear. 4 ships would be destroyed to save 6,000 civilians. From a military perspective, it was waste. From a mathematical perspective, it was inefficient. But something nagged at his warrior's instincts. These humans approached warfare differently than any species he had encountered. "Open a channel to Admiral Chen," he commanded. The human commander appeared on screen. Her bridge was a maze of sparks and damage, but her expression remained calm and determined. "Commander Zethkar, we are prepared to begin atmospheric rescue operations. Admiral, my tactical officers calculate this mission has a 90% probability of total loss for all participating vessels." Admiral Chen nodded. "Our calculations are similar. But Commander, those are people down there. Families, children, elderly, who could not be evacuated in the initial wave. We do not leave people behind, even if it means sacrificing your ships and crews." For a moment, Admiral Chen looked puzzled by the question. "Commander, that is what we signed up for when we joined the Defense Force. To protect those who cannot protect themselves, regardless of the cost to ourselves." Zethkar found himself staring at this human woman who spoke of sacrifice as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Very well, Admiral. The Keth Mori fleet will provide orbital fire support and fighter escort for your rescue mission. Thank you, Commander." Chen out. As the channel closed, Captain Morduan approached Zethkar's command chair. "Sir, are we truly going to risk our fighters to support this madness?" "Look around you, Morduan," Zethkar replied, gesturing at the ongoing battle. "These humans have been fighting impossible odds for hours, not for territory or resources, or even honor. They fight for the lives of people they will never meet." On the main display, they watched Admiral Chen's ships enter the planet's atmosphere under heavy fire. Vraktar ground weapons hammered their shields while harvester machines tried to intercept the rescue transports. The human ships absorbed punishment that should have destroyed them, but somehow continued flying. The first transport lifted off from Shelter Complex Alpha, carrying 800 civilians. Vraktar interceptors moved to destroy it, but human fighters threw themselves into the path of the enemy fire. 2 human pilots died to save the transport, but it reached orbit safely. "This is not how warriors are supposed to behave," said Korthon, watching the display with confusion. "They waste their lives for strangers." "Do they?" asked Zethkar. "Or are we witnessing something we do not understand?" As the evacuation continued, Zethkar observed behavior that challenged everything he thought he knew about these chaotic humans. When Keth Mori medical teams worked alongside human doctors to treat the wounded, they discovered something remarkable. The humans were sharing their limited medical supplies not just with their own people, but with injured Keth Mori warriors as well. "Commander," reported Chief Medical Officer Hethalan over the communication link, "the human medical personnel are treating our wounded with the same care as their own. They are using their last pain medication on warrior Kelthvan instead of saving it for their own people." Later, when a damaged Keth Mori fighter requested emergency landing clearance, it was Admiral Chen herself who ordered her own ship to move aside, giving up a defensive position to make room for the rescue. "Why would she do that?" asked Morduan. "Our pilot is not her responsibility." Zethkar watched the human admiral coordinate the rescue of a Keth Mori warrior, while her own ship took enemy fire. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "responsibility means something different to humans than it does to us." The battle raged for 3 more hours. When the last civilian transport cleared the planet's atmosphere, The surface of Haven's Rest was nothing but glowing craters and twisted metal. The Vraktar had taken what they needed and begun their withdrawal. But 50,000 people lived because 12 human ships had refused to abandon them, and Fleet Commander Zethkar found himself looking at these strange, chaotic, impossible humans with something approaching respect. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "Well done, all ships. Prepare to escort the refugee convoy to safe harbor." As the combined human and Kethmori ships formed up around the civilian transports, Zethkar realized that something fundamental had changed in his understanding of the galaxy. Perhaps these humans were not chaotic after all. Perhaps they simply operated according to principles he had never bothered to consider. The thought both troubled and fascinated him as they began the long journey to safety. The refugee convoy traveled through space at a steady pace. 50,000 survivors protected by the combined might of human and Kethmori warships. Fleet Commander Zethkar stood on the observation deck of the Times Eternal Honor *, watching the civilian transports drift silently through the star field. 3 days had passed since the battle at Haven's Rest. 3 days of working alongside humans, coordinating refugee care, and managing the aftermath of the evacuation. In that time, Zethkar had seen things that challenged every assumption he had held about this strange species. "Commander," said Admiral Chen's voice from behind him. She had been granted permission to visit the Kethmori flagship for a joint planning session. "Thank you for allowing me aboard your vessel." "Louvre." Zethkar turned to face the human admiral. Up close, she looked tired and worn from the battle, but her bearing remained proud and professional. "Admiral Chen, welcome aboard the Times Eternal Honor *. I trust your quarters are adequate, more than adequate, thank you. Your crew has been very gracious to my people." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the convoy. Finally, Zethkar spoke the question that had been troubling him for days. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you not retreat when the situation became hopeless? Your fleet could have escaped with minimal losses and regrouped elsewhere. The mathematical logic was clear. You were going to die." Admiral Chen considered the question carefully. "Commander, may I share something about human military tradition? Every new officer takes an oath when they join the defense force. Part of that oath states, 'I will never abandon those placed in my care, regardless of the cost to myself.' We do not view it as mathematics. We view it as sacred duty, even when that duty means certain death, especially then. Commander, in human culture, we have a saying, 'The measure of a civilization is how it treats those who cannot defend themselves.' Those people on Haven's Rest could not defend themselves against the Vraktar. If we had abandoned them to save our ships, what would that make us?" Zethkar found himself thinking about the sacred code of his own people. For 10,000 years, the Kethmori had followed laws that demanded honor, even at the cost of life. But their honor was about personal courage and glory in battle. Human honor seemed to be about something else entirely. "Admiral, I must confess something to you. Before this mission, my empire classified humans as a species beneath our notice. We viewed your wars as chaotic and meaningless." Admiral Chen nodded without offense. "Many older species feel that way about us. We are young, and we make mistakes. But we learn from those mistakes. What I witnessed during this battle suggests we may have been wrong about humans." A communication alert interrupted their conversation. "Communications." Officer Veltara's voice came through the ship's speakers. "Commander, we are receiving an urgent transmission from Kethmori High Command." Zethkar and Admiral Chen made their way to the bridge. The main display activated to show the imposing figure of Grand Admiral Thekmor, Supreme Commander of all Kethmori military forces. His scarred face and ceremonial armor marked him as one of the Empire's most decorated warriors. "Fleet Commander Zethkar," the Grand Admiral's voice rumbled with authority. "We have received your initial report on the Haven's Rest incident. You are ordered to return to home space immediately for full debriefing." "Understood, Grand Admiral." "What of the human refugees?" "They are not our concern. Deliver them to the nearest human colony and proceed home." The transmission ended, leaving an uncomfortable silence on the bridge. Zethkar could feel his officers watching him, waiting for orders. He could also sense Admiral Chen's disappointment. though she tried to hide it. "I understand if you need to follow your orders," Admiral Chen said quietly. "My people are grateful for what you have already done." But Zethkar found himself thinking about the conversation on the observation deck. What was the measure of a civilization? How did it treat those who could not defend themselves? "Admiral," he said slowly, "how long would it take to establish temporary housing for your refugees on one of the outer colony worlds?" "Commander, you do not need to." "How long, Admiral?" Admiral Chen studied his expression carefully. 2 weeks to establish basic facilities. A month for permanent housing." "But, Commander, your orders." "My orders are to deliver the refugees to the nearest human colony. They do not specify how quickly this must be accomplished." Zethkar turned to his communications officer. "Veltara, send a message to the refugee ships. Inform them that the Keth Mori fleet will escort them until proper resettlement facilities are prepared." Captain Morduan stepped forward with concern. "Commander, this could be interpreted as disobeying direct orders from High Command." "No, Captain. This is fulfilling our duty under the sacred code. These people are still in distress and need protection. Our obligation continues until they are safe." Over the following weeks, as temporary colonies took shape on the frontier world of New Haven, Zethkar watched his warriors work alongside human civilians and engineers. Language barriers dissolved as Keth Mori soldiers helped human families build shelters. Cultural differences faded as human children played games with bemused Keth Mori guards. Most surprisingly, volunteers from both species stepped forward to assist with permanent resettlement efforts. When Zethkar asked why his warriors were spending their leave time building human houses, warrior Kelthvan replied simply, "They saved my life during the battle, Commander. Honor demands that I repay the debt." When the convoy finally reached human space and the refugees were safe, Zethkar made a decision that would change both their civilizations. "Veltara, send a priority transmission to Grand Admiral Thekmor. Inform him that I request an immediate audience with the High Council upon our return." "What message should I include, sir?" Zethkar looked out at the human colony ships, where families were beginning new lives after losing everything to the Vraktar. "Tell them I have a recommendation regarding humanity's status in galactic affairs." 3 weeks later, Zethkar stood before the full High Council of the Keth Mori Empire. The ancient chamber held 50 of the most powerful leaders in their civilization, warriors and scholars who had shaped galactic history for millennia. "Fleet Commander," spoke Elder Veltun, "your report claims that humanity should be offered full alliance status with our empire. This is unprecedented for such a young species. Justify this recommendation." The recommendation. Zethkar had prepared for this moment carefully. "Honored elders, the sacred code teaches us to value strength in battle, wisdom in leadership, and courage in the face of death. By our own standards, humanity has proven worthy of respect." "Explain," commanded Grand Admiral Thekmor. "They fight not for conquest or glory, but for the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. They sacrifice their ships and lives for strangers without hesitation. They treat even their enemies with dignity and honor. When given the choice between saving themselves and saving others, they choose others every time." The chamber fell silent as the council considered his words. Finally, Elder Velthun spoke again. "These are interesting claims, Commander. But how do we know this behavior is consistent, and not merely the actions of a few exceptional individuals?" Zethkar smiled. "Because I have brought proof, honored elder." He gestured to the chamber's side entrance. "With the council's permission, I have invited witnesses to testify." Admiral Sarah Chen entered the chamber, accompanied by 3 other human officers. Behind them came a dozen Keth Mori warriors who had fought alongside the humans at Haven's Rest. For the next hour, the council heard testimony about human courage, sacrifice, and honor. Keth Mori warriors spoke of humans who had shared their medical supplies and food rations. Human officers described Keth Mori acts of heroism and brotherhood. When the testimony ended, Grand Admiral Thekmor stood to address the chamber. "Fleet Commander Zethkar, your recommendation is noted and will be considered by the full council. In the meantime, I am authorizing the establishment of a joint human Keth Mori military exchange program. We will learn more about these humans through direct cooperation. As the session concluded, Admiral Chen approached Zethkar with a smile. Commander, I do not know how to thank you for this opportunity. No thanks are necessary, Admiral. I have simply recognized what was already true. Your people have earned their place among the stars through their actions, not their words. 6 months later, Zethkar watched from the bridge of the Time's Eternal Honor Times as the first mixed human Kethmori squadron departed for patrol duty. Human and alien ships flew in perfect formation, their crews trained to work together as a single unit. Commander, reported Veltara. Incoming transmission from the squadron leader. The display showed the bridge of a human destroyer, where Captain James Morrison commanded a mixed crew of both species. Eternal Honor? This is Squadron Alpha. All ships report ready for patrol. Thank you for making this possible. As the squadron disappeared into faster-than-light travel, Zethkar reflected on how much had changed since that first reluctant response to a human distress call. Sometimes the greatest honor came from admitting when you were wrong about something important. The humans had taught him that strength was not just about weapons and armor. True strength came from the willingness to sacrifice for others, to fight impossible battles for the right reasons, and to never abandon those who needed protection. In return, the Kethmori had given humanity something equally valuable: recognition that their ideals had worth beyond their own species. Together, they would face whatever challenges the galaxy might hold. The stars continued their ancient dance, but now human and Kethmori ships danced among them as partners in the great work of protecting civilization itself.